So we heard from the coordinators yesterday. I want to start with Bobby Babich. We spent a lot of time this morning on Joe Brady, and we'll get to that maybe at the end. But, Bobby Babich, his second year calling plays for this defense, and, the amount of turnover on that side of the ball, he's the one of the two that's had big changes really come his way. So what'd you take away from Babich in the way that they're preparing this defense and how it might be different this year?
Yeah, actually, he said, every year you obviously have to have some adjustments. He felt last year one area they can get better is the way he put it was to be a little bit more consistent in their weekly approach. Now, I think you could take that a lot of different ways. To me, that might have meant okay, on a week-to-week basis, we got to stay consistent to what our core values are, what we do. Maybe we got a little out of character a few times last year. He didn't say that's why I'm interpreting it, right? He didn't give us the exact details of that, but that's what I thought was interesting. And then when it comes to the new pieces and fitting them in, he's like, look, this is my job. We adjust. We adjust through the season. We adjust now. You're always adjusting. You're figuring it out as you go. And, specifically a guy like Joey Bosa, who's not there right now. They have a plan for Joey Bosa, but right now he's not playing. And he said, hey, when Joey Bosa's available, he's available. But in the meantime, we don't flinch. That's what he said. We don't flinch. So, you get the sense of, hey, you go forward with what you have and you make the adjustments. But at the same time, I think there's some core principal values that they want to stay true to as a defense here.
And when it comes to Babich's identity in the defense, Sal, what we saw in year one looked similar, right, to what you would come accustomed to in a Sean McDermott defense when he was calling plays, or even before that with Leslie Frazier, but some differences. And then, I don't know, how would you expect the defense to look different on the overall with the personnel changes and then with Babich going into year two?
It remains to be seen, Joe, but I think there's been a lot of talk, and I don't disagree, and I want to see, do they play a little bit more man-to-man? Are they a little bit more aggressive on the outside when it comes to that? They drafted Max Harrison, obviously, who has this elite speed, and he's really twitchy, right? Does that allow them to maybe take some more risks and play a little bit more aggressive on the outside, man-to-man? You can get burned that way, but you can also create big plays. They had a lot of takeaways last year. It wasn't because they were, sticky man-to-man defense takeaways. They just were very opportunistic. They did a great job of, punching the ball out at times and just rallying to the football when it does come loose and guys being there. So I do wonder if that's the case. Now, Mike Pellegrino joins the staff. One thing that he said about Mike Pellegrino, he came from New England. Mike Pellegrino was the defensive backs coach there, nickel coach for the Bills. And he said the one thing that always stood out about Patriots defensive backs is how competitive they were all the time. And they're always trying to, do things to kind of, make sure that they're aggressive and whatever, in your face or however you want to put it. But that stood out to me. So is that what they're going to be a little bit more this year, of a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more in your face, outside, man-to-man? Those are things that I'll be watching for.
Sal Capaccio joining us on the Western Hotline, recapping another day of Bills OTAs as we are in June football prep, gearing up for training camp, which is about 7 weeks away before we get off the training camp. Hairston, Sal, the reviews on him, it was interesting hearing Tre'Davious White talk about, his feeling like being a veteran for a young guy. He was remembering his time doing it. It wasn't exactly the same positional players, but just, guys that kind of look to younger players and look how they can make a difference. And it sounds like Trey White is going to be someone to do that.
Yeah, and I think back to when Vince Carter was at camp last week at OTAs, and him talking about this from his own perspective of this great NBA player who played a long time in the league. And, he talked about when you're older, how that's such a responsibility to be able to do that because you're all trying to win. And yeah, sure, you're competitive. Tre'Davious White is trying to win a job, but he's trying to win it at the same time. He's trying to be a good mentor and a good, leader for Max Harrison and the rest of the younger DBs. It's no different than what we talk about quarterbacks a lot of times. There's been a lot of talk lately in Cleveland with Joe Flacco with this, right? And how Joe Flacco is approaching his job. And, you try to be the ultimate teammate, but at the same time, you have your own job that you're trying to fulfill. And Tre'Davious White said when he came in, he had Lorenzo Alexander, he had Kyle Williams, he had Micah Hyde, he had Jordan Poyer to lean on. Now, those guys are a little bit younger, but the veterans especially, those are the guys that he really leaned on. And, he said he needs to be there for Max Harrison in the same way, and he wants to do that because – listen, I think Tre'Davious White has understood, and it really stood out to me, guys, when he spoke to the media a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, I guess, after he signed. He said he gained such a perspective of after the injuries, and he never knew that would be his last time playing with Micah and Jordan. And then he had the injuries, and he basically, had to kind of understand, where he is in the timeline of his career and what it means. And I think that everybody kind of gains that perspective as they get older, and I think that's why he's taking the approach with Max Harrison and the younger guys that he is.
He also talked yesterday, Sal, about Deone Walker, the Bills' 4th-round pick. What did he say about Walker in terms of what he likes? And then also, is there any talk at all about him being managed, limited? I mean, there was that back injury, but I don't know that I've seen anything about him other than being a full go. But you tell me.
No, I've not seen him anything other than what everybody else is doing. We do not get actual participation reports during OTAs. They don't tell us limited or full. But I can tell you this. He's wearing a white jersey like the rest of the defense. He's not wearing red. Taron Johnson recovering from a surgery. He's wearing red, but he's doing everything. Deone Walker's out there with everybody else wearing a white jersey, going through all the drills. I posted a video yesterday of all the defensive linemen who are there going through a pass rush drill, and they're hitting their hands, they're running around, they're going through the drill, and you could see right there, like, how big this man is and how he moves for a big man. In fact, some people even commented on my video of, wow, look at, Deone Walker and how big that he is and moves that well. And in fact, that's what Bobby Babich said about him when he spoke. He said, he's just like, you shouldn't be able to move the way he can move for a big guy like that.
Sal Capaccio with us on the West Her Hotline. Sal, what about on the offensive side of the ball, hearing from Joe Brady yesterday and what maybe your biggest takeaway was from him? I was interested about his comments about Coleman and Shakir when talking about versatility of the positions, and it almost sounded like when he got asked about Coleman in the slot, Sal, that it sounded like any time that would happen, Babich kind of spoke to maybe that'd be more because he's trying to move Shakir around rather than, like, I think this is what we should do with Coleman. You know what I mean?
I do. I'll have to listen for that. I didn't take it from that specifically, but he did not dismiss it, right? And he did talk about the versatility of both of them. And maybe that's the case, Joe. I think more than anything, and this goes back, we know this just from Joe Brady the last year and a half, of him being the offensive coordinator of the Bills. They just believe that, they don't have assignments for wide receivers and positions. They're not, you're X, you're outside, you're in the slot. They don't do that. What they do is you have to know everything, and you got to be able to play everywhere. And that's what their plan is. So when you go into a game, you can say, you know what, this is a really good matchup where maybe we can use Keon Coleman a little bit more in the slot. Now, yeah, coming with that is, remember last year we talked about, did they want to put that on his plate as much? Well, he's a year in the system now. He knows a little bit more. Maybe you're more comfortable with putting that on his plate now. So Joe Brady is very much of the mindset of everybody has to be able to play everywhere on this offense. If you might be outside one game or one play, you might be inside more one game or one play, and they're going to have to figure that out. We know Khalil Shakir has that versatility. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest, but he still works pretty well on the outside, and, of course, he can work in the slot as well. So, yeah, I get the sense that, and, of course, at this time of year, he's also not going to give you the goods, right, what the plan is for what they're going to do with Keon Coleman. They're not going to do that at this time of the year either. But I get the sense we could possibly see Keon Coleman a little bit in the slot. But it might be a work where let's see what happens early on, training camp, and see how it fits for him. If not, we'll kind of stick with him being on the outside.
Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline on Bills OTAs. So the schedule going forward here, Sal, wrapping this up and then to mandatory minicamp?
Yeah, so the team had OTAs Monday and Tuesday yesterday. One media day, that was yesterday. They're off today from being on the field. Tomorrow they'll be back on the field. That's their final OTA, voluntary. Next week is mandatory minicamp. That's when we'll be ratcheting up. Is Trey White there?
James Cook,
James Cook there? Is James Cook there? And, we're going to be paying attention to that. We're going to be out there every day. The media only gets one day of OTAs each week, but we get each day of mandatory minicamp. So we'll see who's out there and who's not. And obviously Josh wasn't there yesterday. Pretty understandable. He got married in California over the weekend. Some of the guys, though, if you see the social media pictures floating around, there weren't a lot of them. They kept a lot of things under wraps. But you could see that Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, I believe I saw a little bit of Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox. It looked like they were there at the wedding, and they were also at the OTA yesterday, although I will say Spencer Brown did not participate yesterday. He was without a helmet and on the sideline. Damar Hamlin did not participate yesterday. He was out with a helmet on the sideline. And Cam Lewis wasn't there at all yesterday, along with James Cook. Joey Bosa, obviously, we know that he's injured. He's not participating.
All right. Very good.
Gabe Davis was also at that wedding.
Uh-huh.
He was. And today, Gabe is apparently visiting the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, but very quickly on that, we had talked about him with you the day he got released and maybe even for a couple of days. At this point, there is zero belief, right, that he's in play for the Bills or expectation from you that's coming?
I would say, pretty low. I don't know, zero, but pretty low, right? I mean, you never know at any point that could happen. But, yeah, Joe, I would say it's not happening right now. I think the only way it would happen is if maybe the Bills, there's an injury or something like that. Gabe is still out there at some point later in the offseason, and they say, you know what, he can come in for a really minimum deal of some sort. I think there's offset language anyway for his deal. But, yes, I think to basically answer your question, it's pretty minimal to nothing chance right now.
Very good. Thanks, Sal. Yeah, thank you. We're good. All I was going to say was about James Cook, ratcheting up the James Cook watch. Even if he is there, that watch is ratcheted up because does he speak on it? What does he say about it? How well is he able to, tamp it down? Whatever. Like it could be, I'm here, I'm not happy. It could be a lot of different things. So next week will be interesting.
Yeah, and does he even do drills? Like we've seen these hold-ins, right?
Yeah.
Hold outs.
Right.
You show up, you're not fined, and then you don't do anything. So, that's all, 6 days from now, and that'll be kind of the thing that we'll be watching the most for next week.
Very good. Thanks, Sal.
You got it.
All right, Sal Capaccio on the West Her Hotline on Bills OTAs.